Hello, people. You're welcome to ProUp Masterclass. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi. And in today's class, I want to talk about work. And I think if you've been following my podcast for a while, you would realize that the subject matter of work is a very important subject matter to me. I think a lot of my content revolves around work or doing work. And I guess that's why the podcast is called ProUp Masterclass in the first place. Um, because I know that work is very important, and it takes up a lot of our life. It actually does take up a lot of our life. When we are at the prime of our lives, it is when we are sent out to work, and that's when people engage in work the most. And if we look at it, our life will actually be assessed by the work we do. By most people will assess our life by what we engaged in as work. And work is a very important subject matter, and that's why when you read through the Bible tells you at the end of the day, at the end of a man's life, what would be judged is his work, and it will be checked to see whether his work will be able to go through fire or last at the end of the day. So work is very important, and I've come to understand this. But today's class was really inspired by a, a a speaking engagement I had some weeks ago, and I started out speaking by asking the people in the room um, if they were working. Um, it wasn't meant to be a trick question. It was just meant to be a question to lead into what I wanted to say. But then I was kind of shocked when people were hesitant in putting up their hands. I would have thought it was a simple yes or no question, but I could see that people were confused. And I asked, how many of you here are working? And they were confused. And it took some time for me to really explain what I meant by work to them. And I realized the confusion was based on some misconceptions that we have about work. Otherwise, a pretty straightforward question. So after the speaking engagement, I spent some time thinking, why were these people so confused about this very simple question that I used in opening up my talk? And why weren't they sure whether they were working or not? And I kind of brought it down to 5 misconceptions we have about work that makes us insecure when it comes to the subject matter of work. And these 5 misconceptions are: number one, we always feel like work has to be paid, so work should be paid. So if you are not being paid, it's not work. If I'm doing something and I'm not being paid for doing it, it's not work. That's a misconception. That's actually a misconception. Work doesn't have to be paid. Work doesn't have to be paid. So we have that misconception that work has to be paid. Work doesn't have to be paid. In fact, when we go back to the history of work, people worked on farms and planting things mainly for sustenance. They were not paid for planting. You understand? For going to plant. Women went to do domestic work. They went to wash by the river, fetch water, do stuff like that. Feed the animals, tend gardens, and they were not paid. They were not paid for the work they were doing. You understand? So when you look at the early family structure, the man went out to farm. So it could be plant farming or animal breeding. You understand? He wasn't paid for doing it. He wasn't paid. It was his work, but it wasn't paid. The woman did a lot of domestic chores and stuff like that, and she wasn't paid. So work doesn't have to be paid. It's a misconception that we feel work has to be paid. The second misconception is work should be enjoyed. So a lot of people are confused whether they're working. They're like, I'm not sure because I don't enjoy what I'm doing. This entitlement to enjoying work is it's not a right that the work you do, you must enjoy it. I think it's an illusion to feel everyone must enjoy their job. I don't think so. It's a huge misconception in today's world. It's a new age mentality that work must be enjoyed. So a lot of people resist work because they judge it by whether they are enjoying it or not. So work doesn't have to be enjoyed. The third misconception is that work should be skilled. So the work you should do is work that you are skilled at doing. Is work that you are skilled at doing. And that's also a misconception. So people look for work and like, okay, what am I good at doing? I should be doing the work I am good at. You understand? So they feel like, okay, what did I study in school? That is what I should do as work. And I would say that's a major reason for a huge reason for the high rate of unemployment among young people today, where a lot of them sit back and think, if I'm to work, I must work with what I studied in school because that's what I'm skilled at. That's what I've been trained to do. So work doesn't have to be skilled. You don't have to be the best at what you do. No, work doesn't have to be skilled. So that's the third misconception. The fourth misconception is that we always feel like work has to be for good. Now I'm going to try to explain this. We feel like work has to be for good. So a lot of people try to look for what I would call noble work. You understand? So it has to have a good. It has to sound good. So it has to be beneficial to man. You understand? To a lot of people. So a lot of people might say, "Oh, we are feeding the hungry," or "We are taking care of the ill." "Oh, I am building this for people." Something beneficial, something noble, something that sounds good. You understand? So work has to be for good and beneficial to people. No, it doesn't have to be. You understand? For it to be considered work, it doesn't have to be something that you can articulate as providing education for young ladies or stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be something that sounds good, something that sounds like it can put on a billboard. You understand? Something that sounds noble, something that sounds good. I don't think work has to sound good. You understand? I don't even think all work has to be beneficial to people. You understand? That mentality that we feel it must help people around me. It must be beneficial to people around me. No. Sometimes the work you do is beneficial to you. And I will come to explain that, but then it's you. It starts with you, it ends with you. Do you understand? So we must break that mentality, that misconception that work has to be beneficial to people. The fifth misconception, which is the last misconception, is that work should be seen or recognized. So people feel it's not worth doing if nobody is seeing it. If not worth doing if nobody notices it. And this also tied to that earlier one I talked about where you say work has to be good. So you're like, okay, if nobody's seeing it, it's just for me, it just develops me, then it cannot be work. You understand? So a lot of people don't see work on themselves, on themselves as people, as work. You understand? When you're working on yourself, you don't see it as work. You understand? So work doesn't have to be seen or recognized. People are like, if they don't see it, then why am I doing it? So you have a lot of people asking, once they do work, how do I show it? Especially in this social media age, people are also concerned about how to show their work. You understand? So it has become like a thing right now. Show your work, show it. But showing your work is not is not is not a it's not an indication that that's the work you should be doing. It's not a validation for work, that the work can be shown and that the work is recognized. Or that the work is not seen and unrecognized doesn't mean that your work is less. You understand? So those are the 5 misconceptions we have about work. And I really believe that's why it was hard for the audience I was speaking to really own that they were working. You understand? They were insecure. So some of them were asking, am I being paid? So if I should put up my hand and this guy should ask me, how much am I being paid? And I can't say anything, I'll be embarrassed. So they thought I shouldn't put up my hand. I'm not being paid, or I'm not being paid enough. Some of them thought, am I enjoying this work I'm doing? If the next question this guy should ask is, if I enjoy the work, I really can't say whether I enjoy it. You understand? Some of them talk about skilled. Am I qualified enough to do this work? So can I actually say I'm working if I'm still learning to do the job? Is it beneficial? Does it sound good? Does it sound like it has impact? You understand? Does it sound like it's impacting a lot of people? Does it sound like something that can scale? And if it doesn't sound that way, people feel insecure about the work they're doing. And is it seen? Is it recognized? Do I have anything to show as evidence of my work? So those are the things, the misconceptions people have about work. They have these misconceptions about work and it makes them insecure about work. But these things are not the basis of work. They are not at all the basis of work. They are not the reason to work. They are not. Work is deeper than this thing. Now, the truth about your work, being paid for work, enjoying your work, being skilled at your work sounding good and beneficial to people, and your work being seen and recognized, they're not bad things. They're not bad things. They're actually good things. And but they're not entitlements. They're accessories to work. Accessories. Your work doesn't need to have them, but if your work has them, it's good. Do you understand? It's good for you, for your work to have them, but you're not entitled to them. So just like when you have a phone, your phone might come with a hands-free, you understand, or Bluetooth headphones or stuff like that. You can buy those are accessories, but your phone can still function without those things. Those are accessories. You can have a TV and your TV has a remote control, but the remote control is an accessory. So if you have a TV without a remote control, it doesn't make it any less of a TV. But it's good to have the remote control. So it's good to have all these things. But these things are not what should inspire work at all. That you are paid, that you enjoy it, that you're skilled at it, that it sounds good and beneficial to people, and that is seen or recognized are not things that should inspire you to work. They're not the motivation for work, they're not the core of work, and they're not the reason of work. So the reason for work is what I will come to, and that's what I want to talk about today. Work should be sent. You should be sent to do work. The reason you work is because you are sent, and you are sent by God. That's the reason for work. The core of good work is a sending by God to do something. Whatever God sends you to do is work. Whether He sends you to do it for people that pay you, that doesn't matter. Whether He sends you to do it and you enjoy it or not, that doesn't matter. Whether He sends you to do it and you feel skilled or qualified enough to do it, that doesn't matter. Whether He sends you to do it and it sounds like beneficial, it sounds good, it sounds grand, that doesn't matter. And whether He sends you to do it and people see it or not, doesn't matter. The core of work is that you can say that God sent you. And that's why I truly believe that if you do not know God, you cannot do good work. And that's why knowing God is probably the most important mission in life. Having a relationship with God. And that's why when people listen to my podcast, a lot of people feel it's religious. And I'm always the first to say I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person. I believe in spirituality because I believe that's one of the first things you need to sort out as a human being, because it connects you to God and God connects you to meaning, and the human being longs for meaning. That's what we long for. We talk about our basic needs as human beings. Academically, our basic needs as human beings are food, shelter, and clothing. That's an academic thing. It's academic but real, you understand? And I call it academic because it's real to our physical world. But there's also a fourth basic need that is very important, is the need for meaning. Now, why I call the need for meaning a basic need is because without shelter, we probably will die from exposure. Without food, we probably will not survive for very long too. Without clothing, we probably won't survive too. You understand? Probably won't survive for very long. But then I dare to say, without meaning, the human being wouldn't survive. The human being would die of sadness. The human being would choose to end it all by their own very hands. You see, the thing about shelter, food, and clothing is that it leads the human being to die by what we call natural causes. The thing about the basic need for meaning, it leads the human being to die from self-initiated causes. So the human being that doesn't find meaning would initiate his or her own death. And that's why meaning is a basic need. And without God, we cannot find meaning. God is the one that leads us to work, that gives our life meaning. Now, I've been spending some time reading the book of Chronicles in the Bible. And the book of Chronicles starts by talking about the life of David, the king, and then goes on to talk about other people's lives. Now, I want to talk about David and Solomon for a while. And I'm going to start by talking about Solomon. Now, Solomon has always been an interesting character in the Bible to me. He was said to be one of the richest men that has ever lived, and also one of the wisest men, if the wisest man that has ever lived. But then when you read about the life of Solomon, you realize that he didn't really have a good end to life. He had a lot of regrets in his life. And that has always really baffled me, how someone who was said to be the wisest man in the world ended his life with a barrage of regrets. And this is where I really believe that Solomon did not miss his way in life mainly because he had a lot of women in his life. A lot of people believe it was because he had a lot of wives, 700 wives, 1,000 concubines or stuff, 300 concubines, I think. So 1,000 altogether. I don't think that's why. That's the proximate reason, but not the root reason. I really believe the root reason that Solomon missed his way was because he engaged in work that he wasn't sent to do. Engaged in work that he wasn't sent to do. So when you look at the life of Solomon, way before he became king, God had told his father David that his son Solomon would build the temple of God. So God had marked out the work that Solomon would do. You understand? God had marked out the work Solomon would do, what would initiate his work life, which would be the building of the temple. Now, Solomon immediately became king. The first project he embarked on was building the temple. One of the first projects he embarked on was building the temple of God. Because it was clear that was his work. His father had told him that God had ministered to him, his father David, that That was the work Solomon would do. So Solomon built the temple. Now, I think Solomon's problem started after the temple was built. Every other work he did, I truly believe, and I stand to be corrected, is that he wasn't sent to do it. He wasn't sent to do every other job he did after that. After Solomon built the temple, he went ahead and built his palace and, started becoming a consultant to people, to kings and queens and, nobles. And he started teaching on various subject matters like science, botany, life. He was teaching on a lot of things. He became a teacher. He was a knowledgeable person, and people used to come from far and wide to listen to Solomon teach. And therein lies the beginning of Solomon's problems. Because he started teaching and became so knowledgeable about various subject matters, he started attracting the wrong audience. And this is where the wives came in. Some people came to visit him just to learn from him and to ask him questions and riddles, and he could answer them. And some of them were women, and they were attracted to his knowledge and his wisdom. And they ended up having relationships with him, became concubines, one of which was the Queen of Sheba. You understand? They were so enthralled by his wisdom and his knowledge and his intelligence. Some of them came and they were men and kings. And because they were so enthralled by his knowledge and what they learned from him, they paid him back by giving him their daughters to be his wives. And that's how he accumulated all these women. He accumulated them as gifts, and some of the women offered themselves to him. He didn't go out looking for them. He accumulated them as gifts by virtue of the fact that he was doing work that was impressing people. But I truly believe that he wasn't sent to do that work. And that's why it came with the wrong audience that led him astray eventually. And the Bible doesn't actually state that he wasn't sent. But Solomon himself said this in the book of Ecclesiastes, where he talks about life. And if you read through the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon himself mentions what he did with his life. And he said he spent time learning a lot of subject matter, learned about life, learned about plants, learned about animals, became an authority. He talked about that work that brought him the audience. And he said in the end, he found out it was all meaningless. Why did he call it meaningless? Because he wasn't sent to do the work. The work sounded good. It came with good pay. I'm sure he enjoyed doing it. He was incredibly skilled at it. It was seen and recognized by kings and nobles and queens. It sounded beneficial to people to teach them about science and technology and arts. But then, at the end of the day, he looked at it and said it was all meaningless. The only work that Solomon did not mention in Ecclesiastes when he reviewed his life was the building of the temple. He never said, I built the temple and it was meaningless. That was the only work he did that brought meaning, because that was the only work he was actually sent to do. Now, whether God had other work for Solomon to do, we would not know. But I truly believe God had other work for Solomon. And this is where we will contrast his life to his father's life, David. The difference between Solomon and David was Solomon always asked what was next to do. We were never told, or David always asked what was next to do. But we were never told that Solomon ever asked God what was next after the temple. He just believed he had done it. And then he moved on to doing his own projects. That was the biggest difference between Solomon and his father, David. David was sent to fight. From the beginning of his life, he was sent to fight. To fight for sheep, to fight for the Israelites, to fight Goliath. He was sent to fight. He was clear on that. But David always inquired of his fight. He was sure that God was sending him in every fight. Even the fights that he felt should have been an impulse for him to fight, he asked God, should I fight? And that's why he knew his battles. And he was always doing work that had meaning to him. He always knew when to fight, if to fight. He always knew. And that's why when Saul was attacking him, he never fought Saul because he never got the go-ahead to fight Saul. He chose his fight. He knew he was sent to fight, but at every time, he asked what to do. Solomon never asked what to do. So he did the work he thought he should have been doing. And that got him in trouble. Attracted the wrong people that eventually brought him down in life. Work is not about enjoyment. Work is not about skill. Work is not about pay. Work is not about benefit to people. Work is not about recognition. Work is about being sent by God. And that's what I want someone here to understand today. That the core of work is to be sent. Is to be sent. Are you working today and you're not sure if God sent you? Can you actually say God sent you to do the work you're doing? And that's why a relationship with God is very important. If you have no relationship with God, you can never know the work you should be doing, and your life can never have meaning. At the end of it all, if you cannot say God sent you to do the work, no matter how lofty your work is, no matter how celebrated, no matter how much you enjoy it, no matter how skilled you are, no matter how much you are being paid, you would look at that work at the end of the day and say it was meaningless. Only the work that God sent you to do brings meaning to your life. Only the work. And that is the yardstick for work that God sent you. So your first assignment in life is to know God. This is not a religious message. It's just truth. Your first assignment in life is to know God. It's not for God's good, it's for your own good. If your life is going to mean anything at all, you must know God. And then you can engage in this activity that He sends you to do, that is called work. You see, David almost missed it. And that's because there was a point in David's life when there were no battles to fight. And then there was a lull. A lull. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that word, a lull. Lull is spelled L-U-L-L. Lull. And I'm going to try to read the definition of a lull, because I think it's important for us to know what a lull is. So I checked on Google to get the accurate definition of a lull. So lull can be a verb or a noun, but I'm concentrating on the noun right now. So lull is a temporary interval of quiet or lack of activity. A temporary interval of quiet or lack of activity. Very important. Now, when I was dating my wife, you understand, we just met and we just started dating just a few months into dating. I'm not sure. We started dating then? I'm not sure. I think we're just friends then. We're just getting to know each other. We're not started dating then. We're just getting to know each other. And she gave me her phone number. Now, for a guy at that time, that was a huge achievement, having a girl's phone number. I don't know if it's that important right now because you have social media. But then, getting a girl's phone number means that she really wanted to talk to you. So she gave me her phone number, and I remember calling her. The first day I called her, I was so nervous. But I called her, And, I asked how she was doing, how her day was going. And then immediately I drew a blank. After all the pleasantries, I didn't know where to go. And there was an uncomfortable silence. Lack of activity, no conversation. And I said, Tola, you need to say something, you say something, you say something. And then something told me, Tola, don't say anything. Keep quiet if you don't have anything to say, and just end the conversation. And I said, okay, all right, nothing much to say. I guess I'll talk to you later. And I ended the conversation. But this lull went for it felt like an eternity, but maybe it was a few seconds, you understand? Or a minute, nothing to say. And I felt too embarrassed. I felt so embarrassed that there was this lull in the conversation because I thought a good conversation was meant to flow. So I didn't want to call her back the next day because I thought she had a terrible conversation with me. She would not want to talk to me. And I just tried calling her back the next day. And, I tried apologizing for that break in that lull, that quiet. And she said, no, I actually enjoyed the conversation. I said, really? Yeah, she said she just enjoyed the quiet. I'm like, wow. And that struck me. This is where a lot of guys miss it, especially when it comes to interacting with women. The need to continuously chat. And this is where there's a lull in the conversation, people just think, just keep talking, no matter what. Don't let that awkward silence creep in, that lack of activity. And then they talk, and this is where you say things that offends the girl or reveals how unintelligent you are and puts her off. It's in that that restlessness that happens when there's a lull. And a lot of times this happens in life too. When there is a lull where we feel we don't know the next thing to do, we kind of get restless and we just force activity. It happens a lot. When there's a lull between secondary school and going to university, where it just seems like, you're going to stay at home for months and stuff like that. And like, I don't want to stay at home. You understand? I want to go to school. So you just pick the next school that offers you admission and go into a course that you don't feel sent to do, just study, just because you don't want a break of activity. You don't want that silence. So you just go and just say, okay, I'll just go to school and do this work in school and do this course in school. And then you derail your life because you couldn't deal with a lull. That's the problem we have, especially with work. And that's where people miss it with work. When they feel they are not hearing from God, they initiate their own projects. And I really believe someone like Solomon, after building that temple, which took a lot of resources, engaged him a lot, but never brought him the wrong audience. If you read the Bible, the temple never brought him the wrong audience. But then when that project was completed, he groped for what to do because he couldn't deal with the lull. And this almost affected David too. There was a time when David had no battles, and then there was a lull. God wasn't telling him to fight anybody. Nobody was attacking. There was a lull and he felt uncomfortable. And one day he just felt, how can I be in the palace and the ark of God is in a tent somewhere? So he said to himself, I should build God a temple. Sounded like a very noble, great thing to do. But it came out of restlessness, not out of a leading. And God had to warn him, say, don't do this thing. I didn't send you to do this thing. It sounds good, but I didn't send you. Don't do it. I believe if David had done it, his life would have gone way differently. God told him, no, I didn't send you to do it. That's not your work. And God told him something interesting. So he told him, rest. This time is a time of rest. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your wealth. Some of you, when you have a lull, it's time for rest. You're not hearing anything from God. God is not leading. Just rest. Because there's still work ahead of you. And that's what God was trying to tell David. There's still work ahead of you. I need you to rest right now. But a lot of times when there's a lull, what we do is that we get restless. And when we get restless, we engage in activities that are not really important. Activities that will derail us. You start teaching and learning about science and attracting kings and queens and audience and payment. And for a while, it seems like your life is making progress. But spiritually, your life is derailing. Work is about what God is sending you to do, not about what you think you should be doing, not about a restlessness you feel in your life to have activity. Work is about what God is sending you to do. And that's the message for today. You see, there's someone out there, God is leading you. For those of you that have built a relationship with God enough, and if you are questioning your relationship with God or your ability to hear from God, you might want to listen to my podcast on hearing from God. I think it's titled, "Is it my mind or God?" You understand? Or is it God or my mind? One of those. But you will find in my podcast, and I think you should listen to it. And it tells you how I get to hear from God, and it might inspire someone too that is led by God in that way to know it's not that complicated hearing from God, but it's important because your work must be something that God sends you to do. No matter how good your work seems, at the end of the day, if you cannot confidently say God sent me to do this work, you will look back on all your lofty work and, like Solomon, you would say it was vanity. It didn't make sense, no matter how good it seems. So the concept of work is based on God sending you. And the concept of God sending you is based on a relationship with God. And a relationship with God is based on the knowledge of God. So the first thing first is to acquire a knowledge of God, not a knowledge of skill. And that's why if you are a parent listening to this, one of the first things you must teach your children is to know God. It's an awareness of God. Not to kick them into crutch first. Not school. School doesn't come before God. God is the one that orders school, that makes what your child learns in school have meaning to your child's life. Your first responsibility as a parent is to teach your children a desire and an awareness of God. The earlier you can build a relationship with God, the earlier you can hear from Him, the earlier you can know what He wants you to do, the earlier you can do the work, and the earlier your life can begin to have meaning. So I hope this helps someone out there to be able to identify work, engage with work, and have meaning in their lives.